Hello, welcome to the Winners of Sheffield podcast. We are with James Hope-Gill today. James, thanks for joining us again.
Pleasure.
Slightly quieter surroundings
Absolutely.
than we had last time. We were on a building site and I Want to Be a Beather, I think, last time we spoke to you, weren't we? So we've rearranged it and we've got to talk to you today. So thanks for taking time out your schedule to join us. So as we start every episode, just start from the beginning, really, where you grew up. Talk us through it from there, really, and what you went through.
So previous to memory,
I can remember,
my parents were living in Cumbria at the time. My mum went to visit her parents down in Nebworth, which is near Stevenage, and Welwyn Garden City, and I sort of popped out. So I was born in Welwyn Garden City on the QE2. So I tell people I was born on the QE2.
Oh yeah,
nice.
You know,
it's a story.
But literally within months, Mum and Dad moved to Cambridge, and they were there for 3 years. So my dad went. He was a civil engineer, and then went back and did a PhD when we were young. And then at the age of 3, my dad got a job at the university in Sheffield as a lecturer in civil engineering. And so we all came up. And so I'm one of 5. Mum was a nurse, Dad civil engineer. And I'm one of 5 children within 4 years, 11 months of each other. So it was a bit of a conveyor belt, to be fair. Which, to be fair, was, you know, I guess that was a nightmare for them to start with.
Yeah, definitely.
But once we got a little bit older, you know, we were an absolutely rock solid sort of little community and little group. And so I had a good, you know, got some good memories of growing up. And that was sort of in Millhouses.
Yeah.
In Sheffield, went to Dobcroft, which bizarrely my wife then taught at, and then went to Aberdale Grange, and went away to school for a couple of years in Cumbria because of Dad's changing job. Because by then, at the age of 37, with 5 kids, he decided to stop doing engineering and became a doctor.
Right.
So
okay.
went back to medical school, and
That's
so
quite a change, that, isn't it?
Oh, it was ridiculous. Yeah. Yeah.
There won't be many people with that on the CV.
No, not at all. No, and so when he qualified, he did psychiatry for a number of years, and we always used to joke that he did it because he could then understand my mother better. But and then he became a GP. So the whole family, at the month we got married in Sheffield, because I met Jules at Sheffield University, my whole family moved away from Sheffield, so we sort of started new. But no, some great memories growing up. Sort of surrounded by sport, loved taking part in sport and doing sport, and so good times, and you know, got a real affinity with Sheffield.
Yeah.
I wasn't born here, came here when I was 3, but been pretty much here sort of ever since. You know, apart from moving around once or twice. So
I know you mentioned sport there, and I know you like golf. Was that what you were into at that time, or was it football? Or?
No, it was a number of things. Actually, I was a reasonably good cross-country runner, and going to Aberdale Grange, Seb Coe was sort of everybody's hero. He was, I guess, 10 years in front of us, and but so sort of cross-country and tennis and football, and that's where my old geography teacher, a guy called Bill Machin, in the 6th form, introduced me to hockey, and started playing for Castle College as it was then, and then sort of Sheffield Bankers, and then back to Sheffield. So, and that, to be fair, was probably my main sport. So late teens, early 20s. So played first team university up in Dundee, played first team in Sheffield, and I loved it. And then in 1997, broke my ankle for the 3rd time in about 18 months, and decided that hockey probably wasn't a thing for me. There was just inherent weakness in that sort of sideways movement, and so then started doing things in straight lines. So lots of 10Ks, half marathons, and and golf came a little bit after that, and cycling.
So when did you start moving into, what was your first employment role here within Sheffield?
Well, official or unofficial?
Either both.
Because when I was about 11. Decided I needed a bit of cash, and so because I guess it was reasonably hard at that stage, because Dad was he'd gone from a salaried employment with 5 kids to not even getting a grant, because back then you got 1 grant and that was it, and so they had to fund themselves through medical school for 5 years, so things were pretty tough, so I just started a little car washing business. So I used to walk round and with a bucket. So mum and dad bought me a bucket and the sponge and the stuff, and I'd have 4 or 5 regular customers. Just I think it was 50p a pound, back then, because that
still
was
a lot though, wasn't it?
Yeah, no, absolutely, and so I'd do that 2 or 3 times a week. Had a little bit of cash.
Yeah.
So that was sort of the first job, but then my first proper job was at Sheffield and Hallamshire FA. And that was a direct result of my dissertation at university. So it all ties in with my broken ankle. So I couldn't play hockey at university. I had to do my dissertation, and ended up looking at football support in Sheffield.
Okay.
And one of the motivations was because I couldn't play hockey on a Saturday. I wanted to do something. I supported United. So I thought, how can I get into United matches? And so came up with some, with this idea with some friends around auditing the supporters at United and the supporters at Wednesday. So looking at football support in Sheffield, and then comparing and contrasting the composition of supporters, so age, socioeconomic, what jobs people did, gender, etc. And then also looking at why people supported one team and not the other, and what were the influences. And so that allowed me and 8 mates to go into Sheffield Wednesday and Sheffield United on match days, do audits before the game, and then watch the game. But it came out with some quite interesting stuff around sort of geographical spread and the composition of the supporters. So it was quite interesting.
What were the main findings out of that?
So from a composition point of view, they were almost identical.
Right.
And you couldn't tell them apart. And it was something like 97% of people supported who their fathers supported, and so it's parental influence. So it's just huge.
Yeah.
I think it's less so now with the Premier League and
time.
TV. Kids in Sheffield will support Liverpool or Man United because they see them on TV. But back then, in the early 90s, it was very much it's the parental influence. From a distribution point of view, I found it quite interesting. So Sheffield United supporters around Bramall Lane and to the south of the city. And especially going down Chesterfield Road and Aberdale Road. And then with Sheffield Wednesday, there were 3 or 4 pockets, and then a distribution around Hillsborough and sort of going north. And that was, it was based on the fact that Sheffield Wednesday had a number of grounds, and so they'd built up support in the areas where they'd been playing. United had always played at Bramall Lane. And back then, if you supported who your dad supported and the transport links were the main roads, it sort of tied in with that. So it was interesting, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. I'd looked at teaching and sort of accountancy and research and things, but somebody suggested that I sent it to the FA, to a guy called Charles Hughes, who was head of coaching and development. So I sent this dissertation to him and asking if there was any money for me to replicate that in other cities where there were 2 football clubs.
Right.
And he came back saying no, but there's a job about to be advertised in Sheffield, and with the FA here. So I went in and I phoned this guy called Jeff Thompson, and went in and saw him on the Friday, and we had sort of a 2-hour chat. And I didn't realise it was an interview. and at the end he said, "Well, son, if you want to come back on Monday, you've got a job."
Happy days.
So that was literally I'd graduated weeks before, and that summer it was the Barcelona Olympics.
Yeah.
So, and I'd already planned to go out there for a month.
So that was 92, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. Yeah. So literally graduated, started working. 2 weeks later, went off to the Olympics for a month, and then came back. 2 weeks later, got married. So it was one of those, sort of life-defining.
Must have been a great experience, the Olympics.
Oh, it was incredible. Yeah, saw Linford Christie get his gold and things like that. And so
what were you doing at
amazing.
the Olympics? What work was it?
I was just there. Just wanted to go and experience it. So it was fantastic.
And was Jeff Thompson the head of the FA? Did he go on to become the head?
He did,
of the FA?
yeah. So he was what they call the secretary of Sheffield and Hallamshire FA, and he went on to become chairman of the FA, and he was on the FIFA executive. Yeah. So when there was the vote for deciding who got the 2018 and the 2022 World Cups, he was one of the 24 on the FIFA executive that voted. Right, okay. We only got one vote.
Nice, yeah.
my time at the FA was fantastic. Got some amazing memories. I started processing cautions. So it'd have about 800 cautions a week that needed processing. So looking at the referee reports, deciding what offence had been committed, filling it all in, and then inputting it into the computer, and then sending out charge sheets, making sure that stuff was coming back, and did that for sort of a year or so.
Must have been some interesting ones you saw.
Well, I mean, the cautions not particularly, because it was literally yellow card for X, Y, and Z. Yeah. But after about a year and a half, I was promoted to disciplinary secretary, and basically that was then overseeing the cautions, but also the sending offs and any charges. So if sending offs were sort of slightly abnormal in terms of multiple offences or involving club officials or spectators, then there was a charge, and so you had to look at the charge and work out what the breaches were, and then deal with that. And as part of that role, I sat in on the tribunals, and almost like a clerk of court.
Yeah,
and that was fascinating. Sort of bringing evidence and sort of.
I think one of the best ones I ever saw from that one, my mate telling me, a team were losing, and the mallet used to put the pegs in the goal. Yeah. Someone picked up the mallet and went after the opposition team.
I mean, there were some pretty horrendous things going on.
Yeah,
and I think football sometimes can bring the worst out of people.
Yeah, it can.
And definitely saw the worst out of some things. But after doing that for about 3 or 4 years, I was then promoted to Jeff's deputy.
Right,
because with his
still in Sheffield.
Still in Sheffield. So because of his then involvement with the FA, he was spending more and more time away, doing national and UEFA as well stuff. There just needed to be a presence in the office, and so I was his deputy, and in the end, I replaced him, and they replaced him with a chief executive as opposed to a secretary, and sort of slightly different role, and did that for about 10 years.
Right. With it, when you're working in like Sheffield, Hallamshire FA, I guess you've got to make sure you show your impartiality, haven't you?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No, it's and it's you're effectively running sort of domestic tribunals from a discipline point of view.
Yeah.
But absolutely, in terms of sort of engagement with the pro clubs, we've got 6 pro clubs in the area. Rotherham, Barnsley, Doncaster, Chesterfield, United, Wednesday, and you've got to absolutely be impartial and treat them all the same. And for me, that sort of chief exec role is very outward looking.
Yeah.
So what can we do as an organisation to help influence, support the growth and sustainability of football at grassroots level, and that was a really exciting thing to do, because when I took over as chief exec, we had 5 members of staff, and they were all involved in governance, so running cup competitions, registering players, doing discipline, and we had a part-time coach development person, a guy called John Warnock, who was Neil Warnock's brother. And we were making surplus, from discipline.
Yeah.
And so I remember going to the board and saying, look, we're generating surplus. Surely part of our remit has got to be promoting and supporting the development of the game. And we were the first region to take on a girls and women's development officer,
right? Okay.
A lady called Julie Callahan, who's still involved in football, one of the best and most highly qualified football coaches in the UK.
Right.
And so we took her on within about 3 months of me starting the role, and she was the first ever. And then within about 2 years, the FA started then funding all the regions to have girls and women's development officers. And what we managed to do is go from sort of that 5 or 6 members of staff to about 25, the vast majority dealing with development, trying to grow, promote. And so some exciting stuff. It was really.
I'm only speaking from a Sheffield point of view, because obviously we're based here, so we only know about it really here. But have you seen it grassroots level develop over time in Sheffield? Have you seen it? Have you seen a big improvement?
I mean, I'm not sure now, because I'm slightly, I'm not involved at the moment, but certainly
from where it was,
from where it was, it was fantastic. We had there's the Europe's biggest boys league.
Yeah.
And it was the GT Sports League then. I'm not quite sure what they're called now.
No.
And there was the UK's biggest girls' league.
Right.
And we had a fantastic futsal program. So about 5,000 people were playing futsal. And we, despite a national trend of sort of male 11-a-side football declining, we actually saw a slight increase. And so I think we were, we were doing okay. We were doing reasonably successful.
Because was a state. I remember when I was playing, the state of the pitches were horrendous. They were just mud
yeah.
bats
I mean, it's a real difficulty because there isn't a statutory requirement for local authorities to provide sport.
Yeah.
And when budgets are really, really tight, you naturally have to work out what you have to do, and then what are the nice things to do.
Yeah.
And so from a budgeting point of view, you could see that the things like sport were going to get left behind. And I remember the crazy thing that, and I still can't work out why this happened, but half a pitch used to be marked, and then they'd go away and do a different half pitch, and then the next week they'd do the other half,
and they'd do the other half gone.
How the heck, how does that work? But apparently that was the best way of doing it, from a budgeting staffing point of view. But there's some interesting stuff. But I think what we managed to do was have influence, and so when the health agenda and physical activity agenda and using sport in education and social impact, we were in a position to really articulate how football could support those things.
Yeah.
And so we had some amazing partnerships across the whole of South Yorkshire, and with the different local authorities.
What would you say were the
charities.
biggest challenges in that role?
Probably similar to any chief exec role in sport, the number of stakeholders. So you're trying to run a business, you've got to be externally focused. So you need the right structure and the right staff around you as an individual to get the best out of you. And but just the vast number of stakeholders that you're dealing with. So whether that's internal, whether that's your customers, people playing, it could be commercial, it could be local authority, it could be government, and you're dancing there's lots of different tunes, and you're trying to dance to fit each one of those.
Yeah.
And that's exactly the same with my role at the moment. It's you're pulled from pillar to post all the time, and you've just got to do the best that you can. Across the different.
I mean, it's a global business now. Football. It's become. I think it's become more of a business and a sport now.
Yeah.
Could you, when you were in charge of that, could you see that growing, or could you? See
absolutely. And I think that I started at the time when the Premier League started.
Yeah.
And Jeff was part of that.
Yeah.
So he's one of the signatories on that tripartite agreement between the Football League, the Premier League, and the FA, to create the Premier League. And you could tell that it was going to mushroom.
Explode.
Yeah. And I think the important thing for me is, and I know money is invested back into the grassroots, but that's the key. It can't just be about entertainment and putting money in the pockets of agents and players. Yes, they're the product and they're the ones that are entertaining us because it's an entertainment game. But unless you have really strong grassroots in any sport, it's not sustainable, the piece at the top.
Just rewinding slightly, sorry. Obviously, you talked about your dissertation and that you ended up being a United fan. With the topic of your dissertation, what were your influences? Because obviously you weren't originally from Sheffield.
Yeah. So I
was it more where you lived?
No, at the age of 8. One of my mates had a school party, birthday party, and it was at Bramall Lane for a match.
That was it. Never looked back.
So and you don't, and so from the age of 8, and I guess where we were living, it was probably predominantly Sheffield United fans in school and things, and so that's how it was.
I saw you'd liked a few bits on the playoffs. Did you go down to the?
Yeah, went down. Yeah, took Luke, my boy, and. It's another not necessarily disaster at Wembley, because actually, despite the loss, we had a fantastic day.
It's
part
hard
of it is about memories and doing things with your family and your friends. Went down with some friends as well, and yes, you're disappointed, but the next day thinking, right, 7 weeks to go.
Yeah, exactly that. I've said to all my Sheffield United mates as well. I just think, because I personally don't think Sunderland will last a minute in the Premier League. I was watching that final. I thought if Sunderland go up here, they could kick the cannon fodder. But I think it just gives Sheffield United another year to build again and then to get stronger.
And it's really hard, and I'd probably get shot for saying this, but in my head, I'm going, do I really want to go through what we went through 2 years ago?
Yeah.
I had that conversation with a fan before the game, and he was sort of like, and his attitude was very much, you can't really lose because, you know, you want to go up.
But in your head, in your head, you want to go up. But then in your heart, in your head, you don't want to go up. And you said, I don't want to keep watching losing games. But in your heart, you're going, but I'm desperate for us to go up.
Yeah.
You know, so there's this real sort of conflict internally. And so, I mean, on the day, you're desperate for the win.
Yeah.
Coming back home in the car, you're going, have we, dodged a bullet there? You know, in a sense of...
It just hurts it with the last minute, though, doesn't it?
It was pretty... That was pretty tough. But we've got new owners at the club. They've been there sort of 6 months now. I guess we'll find out reasonably soon what their ambitions are, and hopefully, they've got the ambitions to want to be in the Premier League and stay there. But I guess the reality is these days is that significant investment.
Yeah, you've got to have it. You've got to have it, or else you'll struggle. So you've done your period at Sheffield, Hallamshire FA. What was the decision? Did you just get fed up? Did you want to try something else?
Not necessarily fed up, just exhausted.
Right. Okay.
And you sort of, because it's a fantastic role being a chief executive of a governing body, absolutely amazing, and it's a real privilege and an honour. And you sort of remind yourself that every day. There's a guy called Andy Salmon, who was the chief exec of British Triathlon, and he's now the chief exec of Swim England. And he describes being the chief exec of a national governing body as like smoking a cigar. You absolutely love it, but it'll probably kill you. And because it's such a privilege, and it's amazing to be involved with, but physically, mentally, emotionally, it's exhausting. And it's something that I really worry about, because when you look at the Olympic sports or the funded sports, the chief execs don't last very long, and you're looking at sort of 4 years max. 6 years is incredible, and so what are we doing? Why have we created something that is burning people out? To that extent, and but at the same time, it's amazing. And no, I think I got with Sheffield and Hallamshire, you get to the stage where you think, I actually, going from there to here, I've done what I can do, and we need somebody else to come in to then take it one step further, and let this fantastic place be even more amazing. And and to be fair, that it was an amazing summer when I left. It was 2012, so Olympics in London. And again, Luke was what, 7 or 8, and so we had an amazing couple of weeks down in London, and we went to the Paralympics as well. But bizarrely, I was saying to Jules when I left, right, I want sort of 3-6 months off, just to have a break, recharge. And but quite quickly, when it was announced that I was going, the phone started ringing. People saying, "Oh, can you come and work for me and do this and that?" And I was the guy that persuaded me to do something was a guy called John Goodrick,
right,
who was at the time running and owning a company called Champion Soccer, and they were the biggest commercial five-a-side, six-a-side company nationally that hired space.
Yeah.
So you've got Goals and Power League that own sites, and then you had Champion Soccer, which were a big entity, but they would hire a space and run their leagues.
Yeah.
And he basically said, "Look, James, with your knowledge of governing bodies, can you come and do some work with me around aligning our business strategy so that it fits with what the governing bodies are wanting to do? So instead of working in spite of them, let's try and get some partnerships going." So so that was around football and a bit of rugby and a bit of netball as well.
Okay.
So I sort of said, yeah, okay, and that was sort of the start of doing some consultancy. And but it was great because it was half a day there or a day here, and so it's quite low key. But then other people started to get in touch. Oh, can you do this for me and that? And so I did some work for a number of charities, for one of the active partnerships, there was a sport IT software company that I did some stuff with.
Right.
I ran a few events for Sheffield City Council and did bits and pieces. So
what was that tournament you were involved in? I remember, that's how I remember, the Uden Cup?
the Uden Trophy.
Uden Trophy, yeah.
And to be fair, that was an amazing idea, an amazing concept. It just wasn't necessarily done in the way it should have been done. And so the idea there was that we celebrated the history that Sheffield's got, and once a year put on a tournament for the academy teams of pro clubs.
Yeah.
And so under 12, under 14, under 16, those sort of age groups. And we, in that first year, we had the final at Bramall Lane. And there were, sort of, I think 3,000 or 4,000 people there.
Yeah.
But we had Rangers and Celtic, United, Wednesday,
a lot of
Liverpool,
big
Man
clubs,
United. We had, teams from Scandinavia, from Spain. Portland
remember a lot of
Timbers came
American
over.
sides,
And, yeah. So it was an amazing concept. It wasn't, and I was tournament director, so I was asked to sort of create what does this thing look like, and the sort of the people above me were doing sort of more of the relationship things and working out what it was called and how it interacted with the city, and it wasn't necessarily done in the right way.
Right.
And so I left. We did the year one, and then just before the second year, I decided not to continue because I was just a little bit uncomfortable with how things were going. But the concept was amazing. I think that where it fell down was that there was an expectation that it would become prestigious enough that the pro clubs would want to pay to send their academy teams.
Okay.
But that's not the reality, and it never was.
No.
Because there isn't the money necessarily at that level. Clubs are used to being paid to go to tournaments, not to pay to go to them. So I think that was... that was probably one of the reasons that it didn't happen again. But it was a great experience.
So after leaving Sheffield, Hallamshire FA and doing the side projects, we now go forward. How did you get involved with Team Skateboard?
So I was approached by somebody I knew in football,
and
who had a relative that was one of the UK's top skateboarders, top street skaters, a guy called Jerome Campbell. And the guy came to me and said, look, the skateboarding community has tried to set up a governing body a number of times. And the reason that they've wanted to set something up is they didn't want a governing body. They wanted an organisation which would mean that skateboarding decisions are made by skateboarders in the UK, as opposed to the big brand Nike, Vans, Converse. You know, so can we create something where decisions are made by the community, if you like? But the sort of 3 or 4 attempts they'd had never really got past first base because there wasn't. It's blooming hard work.
Yeah,
a lot of effort, determination, commitment. That's needed, but as well as an understanding of the bureaucracy and the landscape, because it's not simple.
Yeah,
and so I think it was that lack of understanding that it was just too much. And so he basically said, look, can you work with the community to create this organisation? And so I spent a bit of time with Jerome, and basically said to him, look, I can see the need for this, but it is a governing body. And so I said, throw me at the people that you think will be most against this in the community around the country.
Yeah.
And so I met with a few people, and without doubt, everybody that I met said, this sounds amazing. How do I get involved?
Right. Okay.
Because I think what I realised very quickly was that we couldn't create something which was sort of almost had that diktat purpose. So most governing bodies go, this is what you do, when you do, how you do it, and this is how much it costs. They own, they govern, they control the game or the sport that they run. And I realised really, really quickly, talking to Jerome and a few others, that there's an amazing community out there, and it's been there for 50 years. What right have we got to come in, create something, and then say, we're the governing body, you now do what we say?
Shots,
So from very early on, I was determined that whatever was created, that the purpose was to add value. There's an amazing community out there doing some fantastic stuff. How can we just add value? And but at the same time, having to look like a governing body. If we wanted to get investment from government and public funding, we would have to look like a governing body. We'd have to be, Tier 3 compliant. We'd have to have everything that we needed. So, and that pretty much meant that we created something that was slightly schizophrenic. So to government and the statutory organisations, you look like a governing body, and that's how you talk to them.
Yeah.
But then to this fantastic community, you can't be that. You've got to be something else, and you're there going, how do we support? So how are we empowering, facilitating? How are we adding value? And that almost means that you become more brand-like, and the skateboard community understands the brands, because since the 50s, it's the brands that have been growing and supporting the sport, and so skaters have this heart affinity with brands.
Yeah.
So how do we create something that's doing amazing things, helping the sport to grow and be sustainable, and be brand-like, and so I think our whole purpose in terms of adding value and not wanting to control and own, and means that we are different from other governing bodies, and it wasn't easy, and I think that I was recently described by the deputy chief exec at UK Sport as being dogged. And that was absolutely what was needed, because talking to the different government funders, they just weren't interested. But I think it's because they didn't understand, because they were looking at a formula saying, well, a governing body looks like this and sport looks like this. And I'm going, well, and they were saying, well, to be recognised and for us to engage with you, where's your club structure? Where's your league structure? Where's, all these things that are involved in other sports but just aren't relevant to skateboarding.
Definitely.
And so there was a lot of persuading, a lot of influencing, and trying to change people's almost ingrained culture about what sport looks like and what governing bodies look like. And so, and that was exhausting for a start, but it was absolutely essential to do. And I think that, and the way that was articulated was that skateboarding isn't necessarily about me beating you when we go to skate. It's about us going to skate together to almost beat the trick. Okay. And so the inherent purpose isn't to beat someone. It's to skate as much as you can, be as good as you can, but together on amazing spaces.
Yeah.
And so once you get that round your head and you can understand that, then and so the conversations changed with funders and with government. And they realised that actually, no, this is something that's different, and actually skateboarding is an amazing sport that can engage with lots of people that don't want to play traditional sports, because there's a load of people that don't want the inflexibility of having to train twice a week and having to play at that time on a certain day. There's a lot of people that just want to be able to do what they want to do when they want to do it with who they want to do it, as opposed to having that structure.
How has it evolved since its inception then, and what have been like the key milestones for the
So yeah, I mean, great question. I mean, it was literally a blank piece of paper, so there was nothing there.
Yeah.
And so having to build all the behind-the-scenes PO box stuff in terms of governance has been fantastic, and but an essential part of it, and that's the bit that's not really seen. We then have to start pulling business plans together. So if I'm going to Sport England or UK Sport, they just don't give you money.
No.
And application processes can take 18 months.
Yeah.
And but in that time, you have to have really robust business plans, and we've got to build a talent pathway. How are we going to do that?
Yeah.
Never been done before. So you've got to go right back to the basics of, well, what does it mean to be talented?
Yeah.
And what does it then mean to support those people? What do you then, what about the coaching infrastructure around that, or is it peer-to-peer coaching? So there's literally, it's what does, from a blank piece of paper, how do you build a talent pathway? From a blank piece of paper, how do you build a world-class performance program? Blank piece of competition structure, a coaching pathway, a judging pathway.
Yeah.
Literally there was nothing there. And so we've had to do that.
Were you emulating, obviously, America, China, these countries have got a lot more presence.
Because they haven't.
They didn't have anything.
No. So yes, there's the national. We're one of the latter national governing bodies to be set up, but I was determined that we'd do it properly, and that doesn't mean that others haven't been done properly. But it was, what are the the blank piece of paper is there. What are the foundations that you need to put in place to mean that you're successful and you're still here in 100 years? And so that's why, and it took time and a lot of effort and blood, sweat and tears. But when you look at Brazil are fantastic. So they've had a national federation for about 25 years. Right. And they're the country that people look at. Right. And they are producing some incredible skaters. Right. And absolutely amazing. And they do full grassroots right the way up to elite. Right. America don't. So with America, they've got a huge number of skate parks that are amazing. Yeah. They've got some fantastic talent. They've got a massive number of people skating, so you can get the talent. But what they haven't got is they don't do any grassroots stuff. So as a national federation, they only concentrate on the Olympic team. And that's the same. Apart from Japan, that tends to be mirrored globally around the world. There's odd exceptions, obviously, but a lot of national federations are, because skating just happens, so they don't need to get involved with it. They just concentrate on that sort of elite level. So actually, we've got a really good reputation, sort of globally and with the international federation, because we've purposely gone out to create something that's right. Yeah. And it's taken it's taken time. We're still learning, still having to. I
was going to ask that. Was there any point where you felt like, it sounds like you were pushing uphill for a large part of that? Did you ever feel like you got to a point where it didn't feel like as much of a struggle?
I think so. I mean, absolutely. Well, when people that you're talking to who are funders and decision makers start nodding their heads and going, "Oh, I get that," you sort of, it's almost a sense of relief, and but that's many meetings, many conversations. But I guess becoming a system partner with Sport England and getting that first funding from UK Sport to help with the Olympic side of things is, once you're around the table and you're proven, so now we are trusted and respected by the funders. Yeah. It's taken 10 years or whatever it is to get there, and a lot of hard work, but we're now trusted. And so that's, we're now starting to look at, well, what are the other things that are holding us back from a skateboarding point of view in the UK? And our biggest challenge from a talent and elite point of view is lack of facilities. So there's 2,500, 3,000 skate parks in the UK. About 75 of those are indoor. There isn't a single indoor space which meets our requirements for our national team. Right. We're just not there. And so we've got some amazing skaters coming through, but there's not many of them. And one of the reasons is there's nowhere to skate. Okay. And so we need some internationally relevant spaces that are indoor to be able to really grow skateboarding and be successful.
How will they get that?
We've got to have conversations with cities. There's funding issues. You're looking at 25 million to build to create an indoor space with event infrastructure, elite infrastructure for street, park and vert. Yeah. And is about 25 million quid. And so it's a lot of money, but a local leisure centre is about 30 million. Yeah. So in the grand scheme of things, it's not a huge amount. And there's other options. We're talking with various cities, Sheffield being one of them, around existing spaces that you can put skate parks into.
So there is a plan in place, isn't there? For Sheffield?
Absolutely.
What was the lady that I spoke to?
Amy Cooper.
Amy Cooper.
Yeah.
And is that part of? Is that in Sheffield because of you, or just by
chance?
No.
So it's an incredible story and a fantastic opportunity that we're looking at. So there's a skate park in the city called Onboard Skate Park, and they use BMX freestyle, skateboarding and scootering to engage with the city's most vulnerable kids, and using those sports to support them back into education. So these might be kids from county lines, and and they're having an amazing impact on about 80 kids, 80 of the most vulnerable kids in the city at the moment. The lease on their skate park finishes in about 18 months. Mm-hmm. So there's a need for them to move, and the opportunity that there is enables them to increase their work so they can probably deal with the top 300 in terms of most vulnerable kids in the city. But because of the space they're looking at, there's an opportunity for us to go in and create some world-class facilities in there. And so the idea is that the whole skate park will be built on social impact. and the impact it can have with, the vulnerable kids, but also around health and education. And so that will be the bread and butter, if you like. In the evenings and weekends, it'll be a normal skate park, so people can go and use it.
Yeah.
And then we'll hire space. So we'll hire certain areas within the space on a weekly, monthly, yearly basis for running events. So that could be international events like European Championships or X Games, down to our national championships. But then also we'll be saying, well, actually 5 times a week for 2 hours, we need a space for our talent, our talented skaters in the city or the region to use it. And then we'll have some of our international elite guys using it as well.
I guess one of the problems, going back, is when you're trying to get funding for these places and you go, the councils are closing leisure centres.
Yeah, they are.
And then they're saying, well,
we're
closing leisure centres because they've got no value to us and we're not getting money back off them.
Yeah.
How are we going to give 25 million to build a leisure park?
Well, it's not, and it's not 25 million that we're looking for.
Yeah.
So there's and I think for me that this project hits so many positive agendas in a sense of bringing people to the city, economic regeneration, inspiring kids to be the best that they can be, as well as social impact and community use. There's a huge number of things that we can have a positive impact on.
Right.
So it's not just one or the other.
Yeah.
It's the whole thing. And I can't think of another sports facility in the UK that actually does that as well as this will do. And so I think it is different. And we're looking at the normal funders across the UK.
Yeah.
Sport England, the lottery, UK Sport. But for me, there's an amazing opportunity from a philanthropy point of view. There's some people in the UK that are very wealthy that want to make a difference.
Yeah, definitely.
And actually, £4 or £5 million isn't a lot of money in the grand scheme of things. And yet, this project, it will transform skateboarding, but also it will have a fantastic impact on hundreds of people, thousands of people in the city. So we're hoping to talk and working out a strategy to try and get some philanthropic money in.
Good stuff. I'm conscious of time. We're sort of only got about 10 minutes left.
Okay.
And I know that you're very into your charitable sort of activities and what have you. Talk us through what got you into that. And
yeah, it's a pretty sad story. So we had a little boy called Timothy who had a genetic disease called mucopolysaccharidosis, which is basically at molecular level, the body is producing waste, but it's then getting rid of that waste with enzymes in each cell, and those enzymes work on a chain reaction. So there's about 20 enzymes that break down the waste in sort of molecularly, and if you have one missing, then the waste stops getting broken down at a certain level. And so if you're missing the last enzyme, for example, you might never know in your life that you've got this hereditary issue or condition. If you're missing the first, no waste is broken down. And Timothy had the first, so it's called MPS Hurler's 1. And so effectively, when he was about a year, we just noticed that he was just struggling a little bit. He started to get a bit of hydrocephalus, so his head was growing. Because what happens, the waste in each cell then accumulates around organs, so organs become painful, and anyway, we found out that he'd got this thing, and he had a bone marrow transplant, which at the time was the only treatment. So there was no cure, and this was a treatment that would just prolong life. And without treatment, somebody with MPS 1 would die about the age of 4 or 5, and it's a degenerative disease, so pretty horrible. I call it an evil disease, and it is. It's evil. And anyway, he had a bone marrow transplant, and that went really, really well. And I was literally driving over to pick Jules and Luke up because they had to have the bone marrow transplant in Manchester. So Jules and Timothy lived in Manchester for about 3 months, and I was driving over on Christmas Eve, ready to bring him home on the Boxing Day, and Christmas Eve night he picked up a virus and didn't make it. So he died Christmas morning, which was pretty tough. So that sort of motivates you and makes you put a lot of things into perspective. around life and priorities and things. And you know, growing up, we'd been in, because we were one of four boys and a girl. We were always in A&E, you know, in the children's. So it just absolutely naturally felt that it was the right thing to do, to generate money. But he, Timothy died on that Christmas, and there's a charity called the MPS Society, which support families with those MPS diseases, and they had 2 marathon places. And so 3 months after Timothy died, we ran the London Marathon.
Oh, nice one.
And but we sort of used the training to support our grief, and you know, working together to sort of try and come.
And you already done a marathon at that stage?
No. So we did the first one. I had been running, you know, and I'd been running a lot, but that was the first sort of London, and then. So the children's became just very, you know, sort of part of you, and because they picked up the diagnosis and did the sort of original treatment with Timothy, but and that led to, in fact, bizarrely, when the Tour de France came to Sheffield, the Grand Depart, there was about 50 of us that went and camped in a field at the top of the hill at Bradfield, because they had a big music festival and a beer festival, and it was absolutely incredible. And there was a group of us, and we had the most amazing weekend. And the next day, 5 of us went out and bought road bikes. And
you're not being cyclists?
No, not at all. We went out and bought road bikes. We were so inspired
by it.
And within weeks, we'd all signed up to the following year. To cycle London to Paris for the Children's Hospital charity, and that's sort of how it started. And so over the and then we've done Paris to Geneva, and this time last year we were cycling London to Amsterdam.
Oh, right, nice.
And over the time we've raised about 150 grand, you know,
Great
so
effort.
for the children's and 1 or 2 other things as well. But you know, we've had some amazing support from the charity, and people like from Dan Walker and Jess Ennis, and Nick Matthew and Fitzy, and people like that have been amazing in supporting us. Pete McKee, and so people have been really kind in
Any
sort of
future sponsorship events coming up?
No.
Giving your body a rest.
Yeah. No. I'm sort of watching from afar my son do some amazing stuff. So he did his second half Ironman a couple of weeks ago.
Wow.
And so he tends to raise some money for a charity called Andy's Man Club.
Yeah,
Andy's Man Club, which is sort of a suicide prevention. Yeah, so he's doing that, and he's got his first full Ironman at the end of July, it's like 4 mile swim, 112 mile bike ride, and a full marathon.
You could do that, Charles.
So
no, bit much for me. We are doing a 24-hour paddle.
Yes, I've seen that
marathon. So you'll have to come and.
No, I will do.
In.
I just need to make sure my knees.
Magic. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, James. Just
pleasure.
quickly, anyone else you can think we could interview before to come on to the show? Now you've taken part.
I think somebody like Tom Ward from Kit Locker would be amazing, because their story is phenomenal. What him and Mike have done.
Great stuff. Tom, we're coming for you. That's all. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you, James.